Hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest who's probably going to be on my channel for the last time, at least in the sense of GamerGate. Hello, San. Say hello.
Hello, everybody.
And yeah, we can just get into it since you are taking a leave of absence. So I would like to know, or the whole interview is going to be like. I'm gonna ask you, how did you get into GamerGate?
Well, I first got involved with GamerGate back on 4chan before it was a banned topic. Not long after the Zoe post, there had been increasing focus on feminists in tech, particularly social justice warriors in tech, for about a year and a half leading up to that. And the reason for that was because there had been so much corruption within IndieCade and in the indie games industry, just as a whole. And so people have begun to increasingly focus on the hypocrisy of these people and just what terrible people they were. And so when the Zoe post came along, it kind of ignited a powder keg that had been there probably for the better part of 10 years. Really, the gaming industry has nobody to blame but themselves for that. Too many failed projects, too many very obviously rigged award shows, too many back scratches and money under the table, just too much corruption. And too blatant. There were too many, like there's an old saying that you can make the same mistake only so many times before people show up like in an angry mob with pitchforks and things. And that's kind of like what was preparing to happen. So people often get it wrong and think the Zoe post was what was like what GamerGate was all about. That's not at all the case. The Zoe post was just the unfortunate event that happened to set everybody off. But if it hadn't been that, it would have definitely been something else. It could have been anything at that point. And so I got involved initially, just kind of like with mild interest, and I kicked in a little bit to a couple early digs when it was on 4chan. But really, I got heavily involved when it started getting banned on 4chan. At first, I kind of viewed it as spam. Then when I looked at it, I knew there was more to it. And then when it got banned on 4chan and the exodus started, that was the point at which I discovered 8chan, and then I actively involved myself in moving as many people from 4chan to 8chan as possible, as quickly as possible, when it became apparent to me that the mods were not going to do anything. Now, I waited, it's worth noting, before I really started doing a lot of things. I waited until after the mods gave some kind of a statement, because I had stood by Moot through a lot of stuff for a lot of years, and I'd seen him make mistakes before. So I was counting on him or the mods making a statement that would kind of explain things better and would maybe answer, some of the questions as to why they did this, and maybe if it was a mistake or maybe some kind of an apology. Instead, what we got was basically a gigantic fuck you and no explanation at all. So at that point, I kicked into high gear, trying to get everybody moved over as quickly as possible. I got into all the GamerGate IRC channels just prior to this happening. And immediately got involved, wherever I could. My original idea was to write something of something called the Gaming Manifesto, which was going to be a large-scale constitution-style document. And the inherent idea behind the manifesto would not be that it would be like some diction or some ruling document that everybody would have to adhere to or something like that. But we were just going to write it and put it out, and then see if people, if it inspired people within the gaming community to take a long-term stand, and if the kind of teachings and the kind of things that would be in it would be things that people could embrace and use long-term going forward to stand against corruption. That was my original idea coming in. But what became quickly apparent to me was that sort of thing, that sort of thing, trying to provide leadership or trying to provide some kind of structure, was not really what GamerGate needed. What they needed was voice, because they were being censored all the way around, and the existing ESOLEVs at the time were still there, but they were engaging in behaviors that not a lot of people liked. And I really think that people kind of overblew that. Like, for example, I think both King of Pole and Internet Aristocrat were somewhat dogpiled, although King of Pole did act like an idiot. But that being said, it was sort of focused to where just this very narrow group of people were supposedly providing the voice for the entire thing. But that's not what they were doing. They were providing their voice and their opinions, which is totally fine. but it had become where people were looking to them for information, looking to them to provide, a channel between between the Chan culture and Reddit and sort of the internet culture and the rest of the world. People needed a voice, basically. They needed a collective voice that could go out there and say this stuff. And the one thing I noticed very quickly and early on into my manifesto work was that people were lacking that voice, because increasingly the e-celeb types would not focus on the major issues. They would focus on, Streisand kind of things, like, what did the e-celeb on the other side do today? But they wouldn't focus on all of the critical info digs and research that was going on at that time, some of it in secret, a lot of it in the public eye. And just there was no dissemination of information at all. The stuff was getting put out and being ignored. And people were really, really upset about that. And so what galvanized me to start and take it up another level was I switched pretty quickly from the manifesto idea to the digging idea. I got brought into several different research groups, started working to aggregate information, to pull together lots of different pieces of information that people had dug up, to kick in my own contributions. And then ultimately what I started doing was was writing a couple of operations and things like that. And what I found very quickly was that people in those kinds of groups, those kinds of research groups, were very, 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 very frustrated with the fact that the e-celeb sort of public voice crowd was not only not focusing on what was going on in the chans or any of the good work that was being done, but had absolutely no idea about any of the research that was being done either. So instead of doing manifesto, what I decided I would do, in addition to the research stuff and the GamerGate threads and everything that normal people do, I guess, I decided that I would create a YouTube account. I would learn how to use the streaming software that most of the big e-celebs were using, and then I would try to become a conduit of information and sort of a magnifying lens on the stuff that goes on chans and on IRC and things like that, and a voice for all those people, because there were no voices. And what really galvanized me to push that into the next order is we started out with a couple of small streams on my channel, and then I showed up on Sargon of Akkad's one of his streams, and then it kind of went from there. It started to get big after that. And what we did is I started encouraging people on Skype and IRC, when you have free time, go out and start doing your own streams. Everybody do a stream. Everybody have a voice, and become a conduit to all these things that nobody talks about, because it had become apparent by that point. King of Pol was on the way out. Internet Aristocrat was about to leave. It had become apparent that these big singular voices were not the right way to do this, because they just weren't. In some cases, I think what really frustrated me was at one point, like King of Pol was something like a week and a half behind on information that he was getting out. He was giving out information on an info digger and op, I forget what it was, and it was a week and a half old. It was a week and a half behind what people in IRC and HN were already operating on. And that to me just was a critical breakdown of communication that we could not afford, because it was apparent to me that we were in a war for survival, especially after what happened on 4chan, and we couldn't afford breakdowns like that. So I tried to become a conduit whereby I would let anybody talk. I would bring people in from public access, basically, just put out the link to the stream and let people come in and that kind of stuff, and let everybody talk about whatever they wanted to talk about. And while I was doing that, the other half was I was still continuing all the digging and the research work that was going on behind the scenes. And that is how I went from not being involved at all to being more involved than I ever expected to be, to the point that I was spending sleepless nights and all kinds of other crazy stuff on this. And yeah, it's kind of how that happened.
Yeah, that kind of leads into the next question, which is, what have you done, and what do you think of GamerGate currently, and what have you done in the hashtag?
Well, I've done a lot of stuff in the for GamerGate. I haven't done too much in the hashtag. Most of what I've done in the hashtag is anytime there was a large event, like anytime there was an info dump that needed to be megaphoned, or anytime new facts came out that needed to be megaphoned, and the other big one, anytime there was censorship, like during the Al Jazeera stuff or any of the other things, one of the big things I would do in the hashtag is I would go in, I would either dump information through the hashtag, as we did with the Edge future publishing leaks and with the Al Jazeera stuff, and for Operation Slam, which most people don't remember, which was my response operation to the Video Game Awards of 2014, because as we found out after the VGAs, obviously it turned out that all of the jurors and the people who selected the jurors were most of the people from Game Journal Pros. It was just very, very corrupt, very much a rigged award show. So we went in and wrote an op and started putting that out on Twitter and megaphoning it. Did the same thing again for Al Jazeera. So those were the kinds of things that I would do in the hashtag. The other big thing I would do, which I still do, is I just try to retweet, not just poignant things that people say, but I try to retweet information, specifically infographics or tweets where people call out an obvious lie by the other side and then back it up with facts with like an infographic or something like that. What I'll do is I'll go in and I'll retweet that and try to put a pretty concise feed together in that way of, you know, sort of all of the information in one place, which is what I used to do, what I still try to do, although it's a lot harder to find that stuff now. So that was most of the kind of stuff I would do on the Twitter front as far as what did I do in the tag. I did a lot more on HN, did a lot of threads, participated in several V threads, participated in a heck of a lot of threads on the predecessor boards to Gamergate, as well as, I guess it was after Burgers and Fries, it was /GG and then /Gamergate, and now /Gamergate HQ. And I would, you know, try to provide info dumps and stuff there. I had a couple different threads where people came in and I asked people, you know, make some infographics. A lot of the work that we did for a while was both on IRC and Skype. The really good stuff, the really sensitive information would happen on IRC. A lot of fun stuff, though, happened with the Rebuild Initiative, which is where I met John Kelly, on Skype. And one of the things we used to do early on Skype is we had a lot of people who were sort of freelance artists that would make infographics and propaganda and other stuff like that. I hate to use the word propaganda, but, you know, there's a lot of the Vivian James comics and stuff like that were made by those kinds of groups. So I participated in a few of those. And the biggest last thing I was trying to do around that time is, as far as the streams were concerned, I was trying to bring more people together. I noticed your channel that you were doing streams. I saw John Kelly's first streams. I saw, I met Shari Vegas. He did one stream, and then I immediately met him right after he did that stream, talked to him, brought him into IRC and into Skype and everything else. He started helping out. Shari turned out to be great. He started helping us with a lot of the digging and other things. And then he started doing the Gamergate weekly update streams with Fidrin. We did the very first one of those on Hitbox, and then from then on, the format was the YouTube streams. And basically, that was the other big thing I was doing, was just trying to bring as many people together who were motivated, who A, wanted to speak out, and B, wanted to do more behind the scenes, together into groups so that they could do that. I worked with the Rebuild stuff for a long time, and then from there, ultimately, we ended up eventually putting together one singular research group, which we have now. And that's another story, though. We will get to that.
All right. So what would you say Gamergate is going to become in the future? Do you think it's going to become some sort of watchdog or morph into something else? What do you think?
I think right now Gamergate's already morphed into something else. The entire purpose of Gamergate in the beginning was simply to start a fire and you know, make the fire rise, because colloquially, as we say. But that was really the point. The point was Gamergate was the result of a powder keg in the video games industry that's existed for years. And it has to do with large companies and indie devs doing things to their fans that are just ridiculously unpopular. We've had the Diablo 3 failures. We've had so many things go wrong. And then when you compounded that with the ridiculously corrupt behavior, with, you know, like the stripper parties and the coke parties and all that wild behavior, and then on top of that, you injected the political people, the SJWs, the professional victims. You had a cocktail of corruption. There was no oversight. There was no ethics at all. And it seemed like the general culture had always been that way. And now, here come along a bunch of people saying, and taking full advantage of that culture, and saying, we're going to censor your video games, basically. That's what it was really about. They didn't say it outright, but your Anita Sarkeesians, your Zoe Quinns, these people were advocating for a form of censorship. they were using that to promote themselves and to get money, you know, through their professional victim racket, make tons of money. But ultimately, the common angle was, we're going to turn video games into a safe space, into the kind of space that we want, so all of our friends can profit off of it and no one else can, was pretty much what it was. And so Gamergate was a response to that, and to the sort of decade and a half long feelings of just being shit on as a community repeatedly by industry and by the games media. And what ultimately happened is Gamergate accomplished most of its goals. All of the mainstream gaming news sites are on their way out. I think most will fail within the next 2 years. A lot of them were, some of them were failing to begin with, but most of them certainly had way more power and control than they did before. A lot of the big operational goals have been achieved. A lot of the nastiest characters in the industry are out now or on the way out, have fallen from grace, lost their power. All of the developer community, for the most part, is awake, and I do mean all, a surprisingly large amount, more than people will ever really know. A lot of developers have spoken out, more continue to, and the normal, you know, the normie masses basically are aware and awake now, finally, for the first time. And so is the comic book community, so is the music community. Everybody who woke up the first time after Columbine and stood against this stuff is back out in force now, and that's a great thing to see. And I think Gamergate, it has already transcended itself, basically. And Gamergate, again, was just meant to start a larger fight that has been brewing for a long time. And that fight is basically free speech versus political correctness. And more importantly, free speech versus a culture of corporate corruption that uses political correctness as a shield and a vehicle by which to impose itself on people and by which to justify its actions or shield itself. I mean, you notice how social justice increasingly, it's not just a form of political zealotry or social religion or anything like that. It's something that people hide behind whenever they commit a crime or they do something unethical or they just do really shitty things in general and act like shitty people. They'll hide behind social justice whenever the critics come out in order to protect them. And so somehow then they become untouchable because they're part of the social justice, you know, mob culture, basically. And so the larger fight now is the fight that had been brewing for longer even than the gaming fight, for maybe 20. That's people who want to be left alone, enjoy their freedom of speech, and live a life unburdened, versus the tenets of, you know, big government or big authoritarian regime, and more importantly, of political zealotry, basically, and political zealotry and all of the corruption that brings with it. Because of course, people always hide behind political zealotry to protect their culture of corruption. So Gamergate has ceased to be about, you know, about Gamergaters versus anti-Gamergaters, about SJWs, you know, versus Chan culture, or even gamers versus SJWs. Now it's everybody. Now it's become people in the United States and all over the world, and in the West and even in the East, that want freedom versus a very, very small number of people who hide behind political zealotry as an excuse for their corrupt actions, and absolutely will not apologize, will not give up power, will not back down, and are clinging as hard and as ferociously as they can to their money and to their power. And that's what it's become. It's become this larger fight now. So I think that the future for Gamergate is really this larger fight. I think that there's long-term watchdog groups now. Mark Kern's League for Gamers. There are others, actually, that some people haven't taken notice of. There are actually others besides League of Gamers. I've seen a couple of them. There's a number of radio shows now. There's tons of streamers, which is what made me the happiest, because I came out, started streaming, and then, you know, I wasn't the first one to do it. The big E-celebs had done it before. But once we started doing that and welcoming people in, it just went like wildfire. Everybody started doing streams. Everybody started speaking out. I see new streamers popping up every day. It's a great thing. You know, Let's Players and YouTube game reviewers, there are tons and tons and tons more of those people showing up now. And most of them, there have been many, many of them, especially like a lot of the 200K guys that came out after the Law and Order episode and after the Al Jazeera debates and after the ABC piece and each time went out there and really took it to the media and said, no, there were several 200,000 plus subscriber guys that came out and did that and said, no, fuck you, this is bullshit, this narrative is bullshit. You have people like HBR now, groups that are trying to take the fight to the cons, to take back our conventions and our culture, really. And I think that now GamerGate itself is sort of separate from that, and it has sort of accomplished its job. This larger fight now, this larger group of people that increasingly encompasses people from all over the world, is GamerGate now. It is the product of GamerGate, the son of GamerGate, I guess you could say. And GamerGate itself has kind of served its purpose at this point. So I think that I'm sure people will continue to use the tag and all that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that the GamerGate itself is now within this larger fight. And it's funny because the larger fight started within GamerGate, and now the larger group of people, the larger fight, the larger battle, and especially the larger group of people that are fighting this battle for the good side, I guess you could say, now surrounds GamerGate, and GamerGate is kind of like in a small corner of that. And I think that what people need to recognize now is that this transition has happened, and they need to start moving on. Become the long-term change in the culture, become the watchdog, which we've seen a lot of that happening. We've seen it now. People kind of are sort of a watchdog group. That's what we saw happen with the Calgary Expo. A lot of people were simmering under the surface, doing what they could, fighting the good fight. And then when Calgary Expo happens, everybody comes back out into public, immediately says, no, that's bullshit, calls it out. Things start to happen. I think that's going to be the permanent fixture from now on. So GamerGate itself, I think, is done in that sense, because it's done everything that it was supposed to do. And I think people are moving on from it and are becoming the long-term change and part of the bigger fight in so doing. And so I think that is the natural evolution of GamerGate. But I do recognize also that there are groups of people who believe that they need to cling to the original ideas and not have any new ideas, not let this evolution happen, and just sort of stay in a box with no air in it. And I really hope that those folks who are doing that and are part of that kind of thing open their eyes and recognize the evolution that's going on around them, because it's a beautiful thing what's happening. It's going to happen whether you try to stop it from happening or not. And if you just sit there and you try to form like a GamerGate sub-community or a box with no air in it or something like that, where you just cling to the same old ideas instead of doing the new things that are part of the bigger fight at hand, you're going to get run over, and it's going to be a painful process. And I think that this evolution is going to continue happening no matter what anybody wants, no matter what other e-celebs want, like for their own fame or their own manipulations or any of that. I think this evolution is a beautiful thing. It's what the people want. And it's going to continue happening, and it's going to continue growing, and it's a great thing. And I think that's the long-term thing. And I just hope that people realize that, recognize it, and become part of the bigger fight instead of trying to cling to the same old, same old.
All right. This is kind of the last of the regular questions. What do you think GamerGate could improve on, and what do you think it's doing right?
Well, pretty much a lot of things have been done right. A lot of the big things that have been done right have been all of the awareness, getting the message out there, and really making a difference on the ground, like, from the grassroots up. And a lot of new media websites and other things have risen up out of that, despite all of the drama and all of the failed projects. A lot of new websites like Ship2Block20 and HGamer or others have really risen up out of the ashes like a phoenix and become, sort of the new media that's trying to combat this old gaming media and send it on its way out the door. A lot more people have recognized the importance of Let's Players, of YouTubers, and freelance reviewers, people who have no ulterior motives and no bias. And finally, people have recognized the need for oversight. Like GamerGate has accomplished an incredible amount on the oversight. The Escapist was completely rebuilt. Most of the gaming news sites, even though they're on the way out, most of them, if not all of them, have still changed their ethics policies substantially. And all of the big SJWs all of the big, sort of SGW gaming powerhouses that were making millions off of this stuff and millions off this professional victim racket have been thrown out now. People like Ben Kuchera, people like, what the heck is her name? Leigh Alexander. I can't believe I couldn't remember her name. Leigh Alexander, Ben Kuchera, and so many others have lost their positions and have essentially, said, well, I'm walking away while I'm doing this, like the movie Bob too. And it's not, well, I'm walking away. It's what it really is it's, I'm leaving because I've been forced out. These people are so unpopular. They've pretty much all been thrown down. And that has been a huge accomplishment. The fact that you've gotten ethics policy changes on all these websites, even though we know that they're trash and they are probably going to fail and be on the way out anyway, was still a huge thing. What's going on at the Escape is much more fundamental changes. Most of the Escape is completely overhauled. Website completely overhauled, redesigned, staff completely overhauled, redesigned, people fired, left, right, and sideways, gotten rid of, all the trash essentially taken out, back in touch with their readers, substantially upgraded ethics policy, and that is a great thing. And I think the other great thing is kind of what I already discussed, is that GamerGate did the job it was supposed to do. It started the bigger fight. Now we have a great story that we're going to talk about tomorrow on the stream, where PC Gaming Mag and some of the PC tech magazines now have had, been shown to have some of the same ethical problems. And now we see we have another ethical violation with PC Gaming Mag. And as soon as they do something stupid and put out an article that's clearly a lie, they immediately get jumped on by thousands and thousands of people telling them, no, that's bullshit. You're lying. Here's the facts. And this is the kind of watchdog that everybody wanted to see. Until this stuff is chased away and is utterly gone, and we really have an ethical industry, an ethical gaming industry, and an ethical tech industry at large, this kind of stuff is going to definitely be necessary. So I think this is the greatest accomplishment of GamerGate, is these huge, immense things. And perhaps the greatest accomplishment of all is how many people are aware of what's going on in the world around them. How many people are, are on 8chan and other things now. Like the great migration from 8chan to 4chan was another tremendous accomplishment. It was one that was fought for. It was one that was really occurred in a very sad time. It was sad to see 4chan go down the way it has, and it still is sad to watch. But that migration was another great accomplishment. And the continuing migration has been a great accomplishment. The setting up of the community of 8chan and the system and the way it works, what it represents, that's been a huge and hard-fought accomplishment. That's ongoing. A lot of people are working 24 hours a day to continue improving that place and to continue to make it better for the users and to continue to try to attract more users to it. And that is another huge achievement. So we've moved mountains. We really have. The single biggest achievement is probably you guys yourselves. Like, I mean, look around you at how many people are aware of what's going on in the world now, and how many people are that much more informed, and how many friends you've made in the process. How many friends you've made, how many new people you've met and stuff like that. That's probably the greatest accomplishment, is the friendships, the relationships, the sense of, togetherness, of standing together that this has created, the sense of being united that it's created. This has renewed something in the form of the beginning of what I think is going to be a very big cultural revolution in the West and in America especially, is what GamerGate is the beginning of. And I think this has renewed hope for a lot of people that we can shape the future, that maybe our generation, isn't, and the generation above it is not trash, that maybe we do have a chance to really claim our place in this world. And I think that's probably the biggest accomplishment, is that feeling of rising up and really making a difference. That is a huge accomplishment. That's probably the biggest one of all. And I think that's going to be ongoing. As far as things to work on, most of the things that have gone wrong are things that have to do with either identity politics or have to do with people's personal drama. We've seen tons and tons of people flame out of GamerGate. We've seen Drybones flame out. We've seen the stuff with Ralph. We've seen King of Paul. We've seen so many people flame out over personal personal idiocy really is what it comes down to. And I think at the end of the day, that was one of the things that Gamergate got wrong, was following around people who had the loudest voices in the room maybe a little bit too much and getting wrapped up in the identity politics too much. That's the reason why people like King of Pole had so much power to begin with. That's the reason why, same with people like Dry Bones and others. Same with Ralph. Is the reason why they had such a big voice is because people followed them without thinking. And there's nothing wrong with liking somebody's opinion or liking what they're doing, but there's a lot wrong with following them blindly without thinking about it first. Because if people had used their good sense when it came to things like that, what would have happened whenever there was drama is, instead of it derailing everything for a period of time, what would have happened is people would have just ignored it and moved on. And some people did that, but a lot of people didn't. That was one of the areas that Gamergate messed up. The other area is this idea, which is pervasive now. Well, it's not really pervasive. There's only a few people, I think, that think this way. But this idea now that, I mentioned it earlier, the people who don't recognize the evolution that's going on, but more importantly, the ones that don't want, change to come, that don't want to accept that this is becoming a larger cultural revolution, that it's becoming a larger fight, and want to cling to the same old, sort of box sort of mentality and stay, to the same old things, and just keep doing the same old things over and over again with no change. And that anybody who tries to introduce any kind of change into that, or any kind of force that tries to introduce any kind of change into that, must be a shill or an outsider or something like that. That's an attitude that I've seen simmering under the surface for a while, since the beginning, and it's rooted in paranoia. And it's natural. It comes from the fact that, A, you had too many big names burn out who had way too much sway and did a lot of damage on their way out by making people untrustworthy. And B, the other place that it comes from is, again, it's just those folks that don't want to accept the fact that this is becoming part of something bigger, and they want it to just stay how it originally was. And again, there's not a lot of people like that. What we found out on 8chan a couple weeks ago is we had a period of time where there was rampant paranoia on the site. A lot of different boards were pointing fingers at each other over some interboard raiding that had occurred, and that was really, really pervasive in the Gamergate board. And what it turned out was, most of the people who were posting, sort of one post responses, like one post under the IP responses, or one post, inflammatory things that were just like one sentence long, that were just designed to get people fighting with each other, turned out to be third parties. They turned out to be people from offsite, either trying to disrupt the site just for the lulz, basically, or in a couple of cases, they turned out to actually be what you would call a shill. They turned out to be people that were paid by either this firm Plug Media or USSC.com or others, specifically to go in and try and start shit. And once people realized that was going on, I think most of the sort of call him a shill mentality went away. The shit mostly got settled after that. And I think now the only remaining mentality that is kind of an issue is the idea that, that we can't let change come. And we can't, and by letting change come, I don't mean like letting SJW stomp all over you or something, not quite the contrary, but becoming part of the group at large, and the large, increasingly larger and growing group of people that are fighting this as a long-term cultural revolution and not as a movement or as a revolt or something like that. That is how Gamergate started out. But again, Gamergate has set off this much larger force. And I think that's the biggest issue now, is people that want to cling to what Gamergate was in September, basically, as if that should be the standard, not recognizing what's going on around them, that the ground has shifted under them, basically. And it's not as if someone else shifted the ground. We did that. That was the goal. I mean, we did that. That's incredible. But you have to recognize that, and you have to open yourself up to the people with other opinions and with other stuff, and become part of the larger revolt. Now, you cannot just continue to cling to the same thing. So I think that's the one area that people should improve on. But again, I mean, with GamerGate essentially having transcended itself and become this much bigger fight now, I think that that's not really something that GamerGate has to work on. I think that's something that people in general need to work on. And the last thing that probably could use improvement, and this has to do with the eCeleb stuff, is the critical thinking aspect. And I said it on my last stream from before, which was the call to action stream. And what I said was, people really need to think for themselves. You would not have so many people getting wrapped up in drama that they know nothing about in many cases. Like, I mean, look at here's an example. Look at the Ralph and Dry Bones thing. Most of the people getting involved in that on Twitter and elsewhere, or most of the people who got involved arguing with people like the Blade on Twitter or others, had no idea what the fuck was going on. They didn't know any of the facts. They don't know these people personally. They don't even know them in IRC or anything else. They never talked to them. So whether you were defending Ralph or defending Dry Bones or whichever one it was, most of those people had no idea what the fuck was going on. Only a handful who were actually friends with either side really knew all the facts and could actually get in there in any good faith and make a statement that wasn't completely baseless. And part of the reason that happened, and you had these like large mobs of people dogpiling, you know, one side or the other, was because people weren't using their common sense and they weren't thinking for themselves. And that again goes back to the fact, you know, where you had eCelebs who had way too much sway. The only reason they had too much sway was because, you know, you gave them too much sway. You guys would go to people like King of Pole, like he was the most trusted source of information, or he was one of the trusted sources of information. There's nothing wrong with taking what these people say as useful or important or even as valued opinion, but there's a lot wrong with following them blindly. And like, oh, if Dry Bones gets in a fight with Ralph, I have to defend Dry Bones because he's Dry Bones. Or if Ralph gets in a fight with Dry Bones, I have to defend Ralph because he's the Ralph retort and I trust him on information. Or if King of Pole gets in a fight with people because he goes on the air and lies about something blatantly, I have to go defend King of Pole because I like King of Pole. These were the kinds of things that were the result of people not thinking critically and not, you know, trusting and verifying instead of listening and believing. Another thing that came out of the not thinking critically was the whole tone policing thing. We had a really serious problem with tone policing right before and right after IA and King of Pole left. And part of the reason that Jim himself left was because of that. Sure, he did some stupid stuff on that stream, but the entire basis of him getting dogpiled was basically because you had other big names, who I'm not going to name, but I think we all know, going out there and saying, oh, it's so bad, everybody censor them, everybody, you know, cannibalize these people, throw them out of GamerGate or whatever, because they're being politically incorrect, and we can't afford bad press. That was, again, that whole tone policing nonsense, the we can't afford bad press thing. Like, I still boggles my mind that people got involved with GamerGate and thought that we could ever get such a thing as good press. We were fighting the press. If you take on the press as your #1 enemy, guess what? It doesn't matter whether the press is objective or not. They're not going to be nice to you. You're never going to get good press. And most of the stuff that the press claimed about GamerGate was made up in the first place. It was demonstrably made up. So what's wrong with people being allowed to go out and express an unpopular opinion or say what they want or act how they want? They're just offering you their opinion. They're doing it for free. They're not being paid to do any of this. So the tone policing thing was, again, the result of people not thinking critically. And I think that is long gone. It's long over. It's months over. People, at least with that one aspect, realized how stupid that kind of shit was and very quickly learned not to do that. And learned that tone policing was a very detrimental, divisive, and pretty much worthless endeavor. And learned that, you know, it's more important just to take everything with a grain of salt. So I think that as far as the critical thinking aspect, I still emphasize that's what people need to do going forward. But I think that people have done a lot better of a job doing that than they used to. And I think that it shows. I think it really does. Part of the way that GamerGate has become the larger cultural revolution is because people have been starting to think critically and starting to think for themselves and think on their own. And that is really an impressive thing. So those would be the only things I think that really have needed improvement, but those have been sort of the single things those have been the things that have needed improvement like since the beginning, basically. I mean, that's always been part of it.
All right. So I'm looking to the chat. First question was, Zan, why not be part of GG while on your leave of absence? I don't know how much you can answer before the stream.
Yeah, my response is going to be, I'm going to talk a lot about this tomorrow. We have a really good stream set up, a lot of topics, a lot of guests, and Tyler Valle, who's in the chat, he's going to be on the stream tomorrow. I think also joining us, we're going to have Otter Jesus. Who are we going to have? Otter Jesus, Tyler Vale, Mercedes Carrera, Lion UCS, Frederick Brennan himself, Queenie, and the Hat 2 from Kotaku in Action. Hopefully everybody will show up. I did reach out to Sargon and Bakad, a couple other people. I haven't heard back, I think, because of how busy they are. Sargon especially he's what you would call hot shit these days. He's really, really busy. And so I don't expect to hear back, but of course, if they show up in the chat, they're welcome on. That being said, as far as why I'm leaving, besides just, like, why not do it on your leave of absence, I'm going to get into this tomorrow a bit more. But honestly, like, I feel like at this point, the only things I'm still doing, the only things that I still have time to do are the sort of research and long-term digging projects. And really, the correct name for these things is not research and long-term digging. The correct name for these things is investigative journalism. That's what me and the other people involved in that stuff are essentially doing now. There's no real need to be a public voice anymore. One of the things that came out of a lot of the paranoia on the chat boards and stuff a few weeks ago was this outright hatred of anybody who's a public figure. There was a couple of posters who said things like, we need to purge all e-celebs. And what they meant is they didn't just mean people who had popularity. They meant anybody who's on YouTube, anybody who's on Twitter, talking publicly about Gamergate. We need to get rid of these people because they don't understand us. And that sentiment is very rare and far between, but the fact that it exists is very depressing. And I think when you see something like that, it's just time to go, honestly. And that, again, I don't want to make it sound like that's everybody. That's a very small number of people doing that. And I don't think that they're going to, again, I don't think they're going to stop the larger evolution, the ongoing evolution into a cultural revolution. Those people aren't going to stop it, but they are going to be incredibly bitter, incredibly divisive, and just gigantic assholes to everybody around them. Pretty much until finally they all get flushed out, or they all cannibalize each other. And that's going to be a rough process, and it's going to be a very difficult process, I think, for a lot of people to accept. Because even though there are very few people like that, a lot of the ones that there are that fit that description wield a pretty large followings. And I'm not going to name names, but I think you can answer that yourself. That being said, I hope that those people recognize what's going on, that the ground is shifting under them, that this is becoming a larger cultural revolution. But I'm not going to sit here and become somebody that has to go out and argue with them or defend myself to that kind of behavior. I mean, if you honestly think that kind of thing, that anybody who publicly talks about Gamergate on a forum besides the one that you're using is a shill or some kind of cancer, if that's what you think, then I contend that either you're a shill and you're posting that because you're trying to divide people, because I've literally documented people doing that, or B, you're just an idiot. And sorry to say, but that's honestly how I feel, is that, like, if that's your opinion, you're horrifically uninformed, or you're just straight up an idiot. And either of those things really are kind of your own fault. If you come into Gamergate and you believe that anybody talking publicly is a shill because you're new to Gamergate, or because you haven't informed yourself on the fact that Gamergate employs that, well, not even Gamergate, that what Gamergate has become employs multiple forms of communication. It's not just on chans, it's not just on Reddit, it's everywhere, with lots and lots of different people from all over the world of different races, ethnicities, and opinions and political ideologies, all pulling in the same direction for different reasons, but all pulling in the same direction on lots of different modes of communication. GamerGate has, in effect, all these different arms of communication at its disposal, basically. And again, you know, this is, I say GamerGate, it's not even GamerGate at this point, it's this larger cultural revolution, this fight, this basically people who are fed up with shit and aren't going to take it anymore, in a simple essence. But these people have a wide range of communication options at their disposal. So if you have just become part of it and you think that the particular forum that you're using to express your opinions or your outrage or whatever is the only one that matters and the rest must be shills, simply because somebody told you that or because that's what you think, then you're tragically misinformed and you have no idea how it actually works or how it has been working or how it will continue to work in the future regardless of what you think. So part of the reason I'm leaving is because I don't want to be the guy to sit here and call people out for their stupid shit. I've seen a lot of very noted people do very, very, very stupid things, especially in the last 3 months. And I've seen plenty of anons also do very, very stupid things in the last 3 months and say very stupid and ignorant things. And rather than be the guy who goes out and attacks and lampoons everybody or becomes some kind of asshole or pariah or something like that, I'm not going to do any of that. That's not why I got involved. I'm not somebody who got involved for e-fame. I'm not somebody who got involved to become a pundit or to become, you know, some kind of lolcow researcher or become some guy that goes out there and just turns people into lolcows or anything. I didn't get involved for any of that. I didn't get involved to become part of A-Team. I didn't get involved to go out and shit post memes and stuff everywhere. I can do that as an anon. I don't need to be part of some, you know, clique on Twitter to do that. No offense, guys, but I mean, holy shit, you are just anons at the end of the day, right? So why can't you just do that anonymously? So that being said, like, I don't feel the need to spend my personal time becoming a guy that calls everybody out, attacks everybody on their stupid shit, or becomes some kind of a disruption or something. I didn't come here to do that. I came here to be a voice for the people who didn't have a voice and to also try to expose the truth. Because at the end of the day, I wanted to know what the fucking truth was. I still don't know. The complete story, the complete clerical history of all of the things and the people and the money and the corporations involved that led to the situation becoming this fucked up is still not completely known. Not even to me, not even to the people who have seen all of the information or most of the information that's available. It's still not known. We're still uncovering stuff. So those two reasons were the reasons why I got involved, because I wanted to be a voice for the people who didn't have a voice. I wanted to be a voice that stood against censorship, and I wanted to do those things. And I feel like I've done both those things. And the last thing, which is essentially the investigative aspect, can go on in my free time, you know, at night, after work and stuff like that, long into the future, for years into the future if necessary, if people like doing it and if I enjoy doing it and people want to keep doing that kind of stuff, then we can keep doing that kind of stuff. There's no need as a result for me to continue to be part of the public side of GamerGate or a streamer or an e-celeb or whatever. Like, there's no need for that kind of stuff anymore. Not for me, at least, because to do that would mean I would have to compromise on some of the principles that got me here. I would have to become a hypocrite. I would have to start attacking people, because I kept my mouth shut on a lot of stupid shit. But if I was to go forward and to continue to not say anything, it would be immensely hypocritical not to call people out, but to go out there and call out the other side for shit they do, but not to call out things I see. So the bottom line being, that is a big part of the other reason why I'm heading out, because I don't want to be that divisive guy. I didn't get involved for, how to put this, because of the fact that I did not get involved for personal gain or for personal fame or e-fame or any of that kind of shit, because I just got involved because I wanted to make a difference, I do not want to stay and become one of these people who turns into a lolcow, a troll, an asshole, a pundit, whatever. That's not me, and I'm not going to do that. So rather than do that, I'm going to go back to being an anon. I kind of said at the beginning that when I felt like the goals had been accomplished and the job had been done, there would be no need for big voices anymore. And we're at that point. It's become a larger cultural revolution now, and everybody is speaking up. And this is the coolest thing. Everybody is speaking up. You have people coming out of the woodwork who you've never heard of before, speaking up and laying it out there and saying what their thoughts are. And just doing that is an incredibly heroic act and an amazing thing to see so many people doing. And when you have that kind of thing going on, you don't really need, big singular voices around anymore that try to, monopolize or channel everybody. And so, like my purpose as far as being a YouTube, on YouTube and doing these streams and stuff, that's been accomplished. I don't need to be around anymore. So that is a big part of why I'm leaving. But I'll talk more about this tomorrow. So you get to hear a little bit more about that tomorrow at the end of my stream. Probably we'll save that for the end because we have a lot of great guests and we also have a lot of great topics. And that kind of stuff I really don't like to talk about too much. You never have. So I think I'll probably talk about it at the end. But yeah, if you're wondering, that's the other reason. I guess the final reason would be, and I'll keep this short. The final reason would be I just don't have time in my personal life anymore. Honestly, I really don't. I had a tremendous amount of time to spare on this stuff last year and during the early part of the spring. But now, because of work and real life, especially what I have to do this summer and what I'm going to have to do next fall as well for work, I just am not going to have time. So that's when you put those two things together, it kind of is. It's time to say adios.
Yeah. And follow-up question was that since San is leaving or you are leaving, you should say all the things you wanted to say in the past but didn't want to due to reputational consequences. But I think that's going to happen on the stream tomorrow.
What I'm going to say is this. There's a lot of things that I would like to say, but I'm just not going to because, quite frankly, I'm not a fucking retard. And there are certain things that you can think about people that you're just better off not saying unless you want to look like a giant spurg, a fucking retard, or a dipshit. Unless you want to be one of those three things, there are certain things that you just don't say, and you just say, well, you know what, that person's retarded, and I'm going to walk away slowly. And that's kind of how it is. So I honestly don't think you'll see a lot of that tomorrow. I probably will not talk about most of this stuff. I'll probably expound a little bit on specific things I've seen that were really upsetting, but I'm not going to talk about specific people. I'm not going to get into details. I'm just probably going to say, yeah, I mean, here's a few things that weren't great, and yeah.
All right. John asks, are you thirstier than SKS?
No, that's impossible.
Yeah, we covered the guest. When in doubt, to asks who were the shills that were paid. Anyone have any background on that?
Yeah, there was a couple of threads on Baphomet about this. There were some threads on 4chan's R9K that got censored. 1 second, I'm eating. Apologies. There were quite a few threads about this. What they basically found is that there was a big thread on this under a topic name called Shillgate that was sticky to the poll board on 8chan for a long time. It filled up, so they had to unsticky it. But you can probably still find it in the catalog. A lot of these guys had to do with this firm called Plug Digital Media Solutions. They were caught. A couple of them were caught trying to derail things on 4chan, and then further investigation found that they had people messing around with things on 8chan. Prior to that, the last big group of people that actually got caught that were literal shills was a group that was related to this website called ussc.com, and they were associated with Something Awful, and also with, I think a couple of them were found to be associated with Gawker and a couple other media PR firms that are similar to Plug Digital Media. And basically those were the ones that actually got caught. There were, I will say this, there were very, very few actual like paid shills, or not even paid shills, but like Something Awful goons that got caught and actually outed. Most of that occurred on the BAF and TAL threads. If you want to actually go look up specific people, I think the threads are still in the catalogs, not sure. But I'm sure if you can't find them, you can ask people about them, and you'll be able to find some of that. And there were very, very few that actually turned out to be literal shills. It was more the fact that once you started outing these people, it was interesting, especially with the Something Awful and the USSC.com stuff, because once those people started getting outed, a lot of the really sort of telltale divisive kind of posts that you would see on both GamerGate HQ and Poll and B and some of these other different boards just like disappeared. And like they didn't just disappear, they stopped like all within an hour or two of people starting to get outed, basically. And I think there's two reasons for that. The first reason I think is, number one, I think there were a lot more people involved from off-site third parties, not necessarily paid, but who were just getting in it for the lulz, trying to fuck things over than people thought. And I think the other reason was because once everybody recognized that there was a common enemy, they stopped pointing fingers at each other. But at the end of the day, very, very few were actually fully legitimately outed. It was more the fact that it was shown that these things were going on, that these groups existed. So it's like for every one that you did catch, you don't know, like, were there 10 more? You know, that was kind of the thing. But it did make a pretty big difference once this stuff happened, because a lot of things calmed down. A lot of the paranoia calmed down after that.
All right. Ultra 80s asks, Sargo may be busy. How about Skeptor or V Monroe to have on tomorrow?
Ultra 80s, I'm going to give you my Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, and if you can put those guys in contact with me, I would love to have them on. Right now, my hair has been on fire for the past 4 days, trying to get the existing guests that we have lined up. And I follow these guys on Twitter, V Monroe and Skeptor, but they don't follow me. And the way I usually get in touch with people for a stream is direct messages on Twitter. So if you have them on Twitter, that is, if you follow them and they follow you, and you can DM them, my best advice would be get in touch with me on Twitter via DMs. I will send you all the information that they need, and then send them to me, and I can set that up. But yeah, I would definitely love to have both those guys on as guests. The way that we're doing it tomorrow is we're having rotating guests. So each guest will come in, answer basically 2 or 3 basic questions about GamerGate, very similar to how you do your interviews, Andrel. And then we'll rotate out to the next guest. And then once we're done with all the guests, we'll move into our topics. We might actually bring up a couple topics while we have guests on. But for the most part, we'll keep the 2 sections separate. We'll move into our topics, and then when we get done with the topics, the stream will end. So it's sort of like one of my old streams combined with how Shari and Thidrin used to stream. And I think it's going to be really good. I think a lot of people like it. The time should not be more than 3 hours, so it should be a lot more manageable and a lot easier for people to rewatch. And that's the other idea that I'm getting at. I'm trying not to have like a 4 or 5 hour, clusterfuck. So Ultra 80s, I'm going to give you my Twitter, and
it's in the description. So
yeah, there it is. At 10 Minute Gamer. Yeah, that's me. So I'll type it anyway. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter and tell me what your handle is, and we can definitely, yeah, if you want to shoot those guys my way, hell yeah, I'd love to have them on. I mean, but the biggest problem is just getting in touch with people at this point, because I'm already handling so much just with the people I already have contact with. So
somebody probably gonna ask this, or probably wondering, are you gonna be active on Twitter, or just gonna disappear completely?
on. I'll be available shortly. Okay. Yeah, am I going to stay active on Twitter? I think I'll leave my Twitter account active, just so I can stay in touch with a lot of the people that I've met. The best way that you can stay in touch with me long term is Skype, because all the people I know on Skype, I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to delete them. So if you have my Skype, keep me on there. If you don't have my Skype, there's a lot of different people who do that you can talk to, and they can put you in touch with me. That's probably the best way to stay in touch with me long term. I think eventually, at some point, I might deactivate my Twitter, but I just doubt it. Like, there's so many cool people on there, and there's so much cool stuff that gets posted that I get to see. Funny stuff, too, really hilarious stuff that gets posted that I get to see, that I just don't want to, like, throw all that away. But you probably won't hear much from me anymore on there. I will continue to retweet useful things, though. Until there are no more useful things as far as GamerGate is concerned to be retweeted, I will continue to retweet things. So if you have me on Twitter, please don't unfollow. I love watching what you guys post. And I love being able to stay in touch with you guys through DMs and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think I'll probably leave Twitter running. But you won't see as much of me on there anymore. Just see mostly retweets.
All right. I don't know. We've covered pretty much everything now from the chat, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna stay in contact with you. So if people wanna,
yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. One more question. Elsevier Auxilitrix asked, "Dan, how big is your dick?" I actually measured it. It's 8.5. So there you go. I did do a dick measurement a couple weeks ago in preparation for people asking me that question. So yes, that's how big my dick is. And no, I'm not going to post. I'm not going to post pictures. So.
All right. I think we pretty much covered everything regarding you, and I hope people tune into the stream tomorrow for your send off. We're gonna see how you if you're gonna come back somehow in some form after you after your 5 months or however long you're gonna be gone in some sort of form.
There is one form I might reappear in, my final form, and that is as a host of a radio station. And I don't know yet. We'll have to see. That's far in the future though. So think 10 months down the line minimum, because that requires substantial amounts of money, which I don't have yet. That's why I have to work this summer. Yeah, but that might be the form that I show back up. And the other thing I was thinking about doing, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but other thing I was thinking about doing is starting up a separate YouTube channel for video game reviews and actually doing Let's Plays. And I'm going to take a look at some of the software I need to do that, and I'll get back to you guys on that. I definitely have to look and see, because the main thing with that is I don't have really good software knowledge. Everybody keeps telling me use open broadcast software, but I know that some of your big, Let's Players, like your Markiplier types, who do a little screen in the corner and all that, they don't use that. The other thing that I know, or the other thing I don't know really, is good editing software, so I can make videos of that quality. And yeah, if I come back, I might start making actual videos, because I've been a streamer. I haven't been a video producer. And so I would be doing, probably Let's Plays and reviews as far as the YouTube side is concerned, and as far as like the, sort of politically incorrect pundit type stuff is concerned. If I ever come back to that, it would probably be doing streaming radio somewhere. I would not be doing YouTube streams again.
All right. Yeah. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for coming on, Sam. It's been the longest interview I've had, so you broke that record.
Oh boy, I talk too much.
No, it's okay. It's pretty much your send off here on my channel, pretty much. Since you're not gonna do streams after this, pretty much. So
yeah. I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate you working with me. I mean, since we first got in contact and started working together, You could have said no. I don't know who the fuck you are, Triangle Guy. But you didn't, and I'm glad that you didn't. It worked out really great. I've had a lot of fun with you. I've had a lot of fun on your streams, and it's been great. And yeah, we'll definitely, you and me will definitely stay in touch. We gotta actually play some video games together instead of fucking around with
we gotta do that.
bullshit.
All right, I'm gonna end this interview. We two are probably gonna shoot some shit off air. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching, and see you guys next time. Bye.